Hello and welcome to my studio. Today I'm posting another one of my favourite demos for you. I think this is one of my first studio vlogs where I experimented to try and find a way to paint sunbeams for the first time. And I think I had a reasonable amount of success here, even if it wasn't entirely successful. So I hope you'll enjoy watching this again, or for the first time if you haven't seen this one, and hopefully I'll be trying out different methods to create these sorts of effects in the near future. So today I'm going to be painting on the back of an old painting. It's Saunders Waterford hot pressed paper. It's taped to my board with ordinary decorators masking tape, and my board's at an angle of 45 degrees so the paint will run. I'm going to paint it wet in wet. You can see that I'm wetting the page all over with a large Harky brush and leaving a few patches of dry paper so I get some variety of soft and hard edges. This is a large synthetic Escoda Ultimo mop brush, size 14, and I'm going to create a sort of an underpainting using sap green, perylene green and cad yellow. And I'm going to lightly dab the paint in various varying hues and shades across the page, but keeping the central area light and mostly unpainted, because that's where I want to have my light. I'm leaving plenty of unpainted patches of paper, and as soon as I get the wash looking the way I want it to, I lay my board flat so it doesn't run down the page anymore, and it will dry like that. But before it dries, I need to put in my sunbeams. So I'm going to take some tissue or a paper towel and very rapidly run it across my page using a fresh piece of tissue for each pass or each sunbeam, so that I keep the tissue clean. I don't want to transfer paint that I remove with the tissue into a sunbeam, because that would look sort of grubby. And now that I've got enough sunbeams, I'm going to leave it to dry and then come back, and I shall then paint my trees in around the sunbeams. So here's the dry wash. I've propped it back up at 45 degrees again, and I quite like the effect. I think it's subtle, but still could be quite striking if I can get the trees in right. Now I'm going to be painting these trees with Payne's Grey and my small calligraphy brush. So what I'm going to do is just paint them in stages, but I'm going to paint them over the sunbeams. But very quickly, before the paint dries, each time I go over a sunbeam, I'm going to use a paper towel or a tissue, and I'm going to dab out the paint, soften it back so it's much paler where the trunks are going through the sunbeams. And while with one tree trunk here it doesn't look particularly impressive, eventually, once I've built up the rest of my trees and the rest of my branches, I'm hoping that the effects that I'll get from this will be sort of effective enough to give me that lovely sunbeam look, but without being too artificial looking or too strident or overt. I want it to be quite subtle. So every time I paint new branches through any sunbeams, I'll go back in with a tissue and just dab out in the area covered by that sunbeam. Trying to make sure that I put in enough branches for the trees to look quite convincing and decorative, but without going over the top and putting in too much detail. Even though this is not as loose as I often like to paint, because I'm not sure how to paint these effects really loosely, I think it's something that even beginners could attempt by just slowly building up, and each time you put in a branch or a trunk, just very quickly dab it out where there's sunbeams, but here on the far right, we're out of the sun. So with these trees, I don't need to dab anything out. I can just keep them very much in the shade and all fully dark. And the same with this little bit of something and nothing along the ground, where I'm just sort of suggesting plants and grass and things like that. I can dab out carefully where the sunbeams are hitting the grass, so that's lighter than it is underneath the shadow of the trees. And now to finish the canopies. If you'll notice that I didn't extend the branches all the way up to the top of the page, I left some space so I can go over my underpainting with the same colours. That's Perylene green, sap green and cad yellow, and varying mixes of those colours and my mop brush, and just thicken up the canopy a little bit across the top of the painting. And the darker I go with this, the more my sunbeams and sunlit areas are starting to really pop. Then using the corner of a plastic card, I'm going to be etching through the paint to reveal some of the lighter paper underneath for some just lighter branches through the canopy. Now using my large harky brush, I'm sweeping some shadows and some dappled sunlight marks across the foreground. And in the same sort of way, I'm keeping it really loose, but I'm going to dab out lighter areas on the lighter half of the forest floor, where the light is hitting them, and keeping it darker beneath these trees on the right. And now I can begin to paint in the trees on the left of the painting in exactly the same way, but paying a bit more attention to where my sunbeams are, as there are more of them on this side of the painting. So I have to make sure I'm quite quick with dabbing out the paint to lighten it back in the trunks and the branches that pass through the sunbeams. And here you can see I've got most of my trees in, and I'm just going to get the canopies darkened up and fleshed out a bit more with my three colours, but mostly using the dark across the top corner where the sunlight isn't penetrating, and then using the yellow to brighten up around the edges where the sunlight's hitting the leaves. And once I get this sort of in place and balanced up, I'll see whether I need to continue with any more trees across on the left edge. You can see now I've finished off with a few more trees on the left edge, and now I'm putting in some very faint pale trees with very watery yellow-green paint across the middle in the background, just a few of them, and dabbing them out, and that just gives the illusion of trees further back in the forest, but only seen very faintly through that strong sunlight. And here's the finished painting. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. I really enjoyed painting it, and I was quite happy with how this sort of experiment went. Even though the effects turned out to be quite subtle, I think they are effective, and I would prefer them to be too subtle than sort of too artificial looking, if you know what I mean. So let me know what you think in the comments below. I'll look forward to hearing from you, and I hope you enjoy this if you give this sort of thing a go yourself. Well, I hope it was useful for you to see that again, or to see it for the first time if you didn't see it first time around. Certainly was useful for me to remind myself of this technique, and I really must give it another go this year at some point. Well, thank you for watching. Please leave us a like and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. And thank you so much to everyone that supports us on Patreon. We really do appreciate you. I'll see you again soon. Have a great week.